starting a little late, which isn't our practice. So we had a very full morning. This morning was Communion Sunday. We just called an additional pastor to join our staff at our church. And so here we are. We're a little late, and we should all hope that we're late to the topic that we're talking about. For the benefit of visitors, my name is Todd Atkins-Whitley. I'm the senior pastor here at Danville Congregational Church. We are an open and affirming congregation of the United Church of Christ, and we welcome all people, whomever they love, however they understand or express their gender, however their body moves. And we are delighted to welcome you into the first of three series on the topic of death and dying. I met our guest speaker, Jim Van Buskirk, through my mentor, the Reverend Elder Jim Matulski, who serves in the UCC today in a church in Belmont, the Community Church of the Peninsula. Jim is a kind of a luminary in San Francisco in our culture and the literary culture and the queer culture there. And found out through Jim that now our mutual friend Jim was engaged in this ministry. And that's what I'm going to call it, this ministry of helping us normalize conversations about end of this earthly life. And I have been scheming for quite a while to bring Jim out to Danville, come out of the city like Miguel and I do, and come out to Danville and meet our folks and have this conversation. So would you join me in welcoming Jim Van Buskirk?
Thank you, Todd, and thank you all for being here. Not everyone's favorite topic, but it certainly is mine. And I'll tell you a little bit about my trajectory so you'll know where I'm coming from. But I also want to make this as flexible and organic as it needs to be to meet your needs. So, as Todd said, this is the first of a three-part series. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, just as Todd said, normalizing, talking about death. And then next month, I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically. Did I do something? Okay. And do I really need this? Okay. I'll take that as a yes. So next month will be specific, and I think we're calling it Full Death, Another Option. And for people who are thinking about end-of-life options and possibly hastening their death, this will be an overview of that. And then the third will be a death cafe. And I've already talked to a few of you who've been to death cafes. Who has been to a death cafe? So just a few. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I think they're really fun. And what we do, we'll sit in a slightly different configuration. We'll sit in a circle, and I'll probably read a poem, and then we'll just talk about what does death mean to us. And it can be the death of a parent or a pet. It can be communication with the other side. It can be dealing with our clutter. It can be our own health issues, anything, everything. There's no programming, proselytizing, no nothing. And it really is a safe place for us to discuss this somewhat stigmatized topic. So the way I got into this was a friend of mine and I were having coffee, and he said, "Oh, I hear there's a death cafe in Oakland. Have you ever been?" I didn't know what he was talking about. So he said, "Okay, let's go." So we went to Oakland. We got caught in traffic, and it was over at Chapel of the Chimes. And it was okay, but it wasn't great. And it was a pain to schlep across the bridge. Well, Harvey and I met our friend Danielle, and she also lived in the city. So we gave her a ride back across the bridge, and in the process, we said, "Well, wait, why are we spending all our time on the bridge? We could do this in San Francisco." So for about 10 years, we hosted a monthly death cafe at the Potrero Branch Library. And we had no idea what we were doing. And as you'll see, when you come to the death cafe in March, it's really simple and straightforward. And all we had to do was hold the space, and we didn't know if anybody would show up, and it would only be weirdos. And it was incredible. People came, sometimes a time or two, sometimes every month religiously. And we had really deep, meaningful conversations. Some people had been surrounded by death their entire lives. Some of them had never talked about death to anyone ever. So it was a real wide swath. And in the process, I remember I was standing outside welcoming people, and a woman came in, or was passing by, what's going on there? And I was wearing a t-shirt not dissimilar to this one. And I said, oh, it's a Death Cafe. And she said, well, can I come? And I said, sure. And she said, well, I have my little dog. And I said, well, if nobody complains, just bring it in. It was in the community meeting room. And so she came, and she came regularly, month after month after month. And she had been a Jungian analyst and had written many books. She was so brilliant, but she was experiencing losing her eyesight. She was losing cognition. And one day she called me and said, Jim, I've applied to Final Exit Network, and the exit guides are coming on Tuesday afternoon, and I'm wondering if you will be with me. And I took a deep breath because I was honored to have been invited, and I had no idea what this would entail and whether I could come up and could do it. So I talked to the exit guides. They explained the whole situation. I went over to Margaret's and was with her as she took her planned last exhale. And it was so beautiful and so meaningful and so powerful and mundane and everything. I couldn't wait to join this organization. I started writing articles, reviewing books, and that sort of, and so I host a monthly Chosen Death Forum that's virtual for all Final Exit Network members, and I'm also volunteering as a regional coordinator, so I counsel people on their end-of-life options. So that's sort of who I am and how I got here, but that's not exactly the topic for today. I thought I'd start with a quote from Larry Rosenberg. He says, we know in our heads that we will die, but we have to know it in our hearts. We have to let this fact penetrate our bones. Then we will know how to live. And I think that encapsulates my philosophy, is that I'm not so interested in death, like what you're notwithstanding. I'm really interested in life and embracing it to the fullest and being grateful for the time we have, because we never know the quantity of time or the quality of time. So my motto is carpe diem. I'm an avid reader, a writer. I'm a retired librarian, and I read a book by Dr. Kathy Cordes Miller, and she uses the term death literacy. So death literacy encourages a healthy respect for and acceptance of the inevitability of death. Death literacy encourages less fear of the unknown. And as we know, death is one of the most unknowable aspects of life. Death literacy can motivate us to complete important tasks, and considering end-of-life challenges existentially, and can deepen our connection to others as well as to our religious and or spiritual practices. And finally, death literacy can promote peace of mind. So I think it behooves us not keep death at an arm's distance, but to really embrace it and get into our lives, integrate it into who we are and how we move through the world. So another book that I liked was 2022 by Dr. Blair Bigham. And he says, it's called Death Interrupted, How Modern Medicine is Complicating the Way We Die. So he has 4 suggestions. 1, think about death. 2, talk about death with friends and family. 3, write about death. And 4, live our lives. So the part of that I'm going to focus on, at least initially, is write about death. To put our wishes on paper, to get legal advice, to make sure that what we want to happen will happen. Because if we don't, if we just ignore it and hope it goes away, we're going to be disappointed. It's not going to go well, and it's certainly not going to go well the way we want it to. So here's a question for you. How many of you have an advanced care directive? Okay, great, wonderful. That's the right number. For those few of you who don't, I highly recommend doing it. It's not necessarily fun, but it actually can be a cathartic experience to say, well, how do I want to see the end of my days? What interventions do I want, or do I definitely don't want? And as part of the advanced directive, how many of you have named your healthcare proxy? Okay, not quite as many. So that's a really important aspect, because if we're not able to advocate for ourselves and say, I do want this or I don't want that, a piece of paper is one thing, but as we know, physicians tend to do what they're going to do and don't necessarily look at that piece of paper. So I highly recommend, yes. Further away? Okay, thank you. Sometimes it has to be, I appreciate that. And keep signaling me if it goes in the wrong direction. So the healthcare proxy is a person, and you can name, I think, up to 3 in the advanced care directive, of the person who will advocate for you if you're not able to advocate for yourself. And that person is really, really important. And it's not necessarily the person closest relation or one's spouse or one's best friend. It's the person who knows what you want and what you don't want. And it has been described as, in the selection process, pick a pit bull. Don't pick your nicest friend, because this person is going to have to go toe to toe with the medical profession, and it might not be pretty. And so when I was filling mine out, I said to my partner, I said, you are not very assertive, and I'm not going to name you as my healthcare proxy. And he said the right thing. He said, I know I'm not assertive on my behalf, but I assure you, I will be assertive on your behalf. And that's what I needed to hear. And also, it's often tempting when we're thinking about naming our medical proxy, to make sure they know what we want, not what they would want in a similar situation. So it's really tempting or easy to say, oh, well, if I was her, I would do this and I wouldn't do that. That's not what this is about. You have to have had multiple conversations to know exactly what you want, and you have to get clear, and you have to be able to articulate it. So it's really important to think that through, to have those sometimes challenging conversations to make sure that you've got your healthcare proxy the right one. And I would also, unfortunately, those 2 things are not kind of one and done. Okay, well, I've done that, now what? It behooves us to look at them repeatedly. Is that person still willing to do it? Maybe they're not up for it anymore. So we really have to review our documents, including the advanced care directive. Maybe it doesn't reflect our goals. Maybe we filled it out 10 years ago and things have shifted. So we really have to pay attention and look at this again and again. Okay, another question. How many of you have a pulse in place? Okay, a few of you, a pulse. The physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. And it's the hot pink thing that goes on the refrigerator. That's nice, but what if we don't happen to collapse in the kitchen? Um, so I'll tell you my story about the pulse. My brother is a palliative care physician, and his son, my nephew, is also a physician. So they said, Jim, you need a pulse. And I said, oh, I thought that was only for old people or sick people. No, you need a pulse. Okay, so I go in to my physician and, oh, what brings you in today? I'm here for a pulse. A what? Pulse. Spell that. P-O-L-S-T. The intake nurse had no idea what I was talking about. So she said, okay, well, let me get the social worker. The social worker comes in and says, oh, no, you don't need a pulse. Pulse are for old people and sick people. I said, yeah, that's what I thought. But my brother says I should have one, and I'm here, and I want one. Oh, well, she tried to talk me out of it. Well, as you can tell, I'm pretty assertive. And I thought, oh, if somebody hasn't thought this through, or isn't as assertive, or English isn't their first language, this could be a real challenge. And it's very simple and straightforward. There's really only 3 little boxes to check: whether we want CPR, under what circumstances we want medical intervention, and whether we want a feeding tube. A, B, C. So, and the advanced care directive is something you can pull off the internet. There's one specifically for, well, I used the one for Kaiser, you could use the one for the state of California. But the pulse has to be issued and signed by the physician. So you could look at it and make your decision, but then when you go into the office, they have to sign it, and then the second part of that was, it turned out my advanced care directive nor my pulse was attached to my medical record. So I had to encourage them to do that. So if you can start to see, it's rather arduous, and we have to advocate for ourselves repeatedly. The medical profession is doing their darndest to keep us alive, and that may be exactly what we want, and it may not be. It may be that the quality of life is better considered than the quantity. So, yeah, yes, yes. Any other questions? So yeah, please interrupt me with questions, comments, clarifications, your own experience illustrated or contrasting with what I'm saying, because I learn as much from you as you will hopefully learn from me. And the other thing about the advanced directive is it should be attached to your medical record, but you should also have conversations with your physician so that they know what you want and what you don't want. And the copies of these forms are made available, accessible, because it doesn't do us any good if it's in a folder, in a lockbox, or behind a password protected wall. And another component of this, of course, is the will. How many of you have your wills in place? Okay, so almost everybody, and that's another important aspect of end of life, to make sure that we have set down what we want to have happen or don't happen. I don't want a memorial, or I don't want her coming to my memorial. Because otherwise she's going to show up and she's going to read that poem that we're sick of hearing. And then death. A friend of mine is in the process of moving slow, sort of a soft move from San Francisco to Palm Springs. So she has been decluttering. So every time I see her, she gives me another bag of books. So I thought you might like these. Well, no, I'm going to declutter too. So don't give me your pile of cast off books. I'll donate them to the Friends of the Library. But if we kind of start to look around and say, wow, this stuff accumulates. Do I really need this? Because if and when, mostly when, we are not in our places anymore, someone's going to have to go through that. And I remember when Alan and I were going through his dad's apartment, and he was a pack rat. And there was just stuff and more stuff and more stuff. So I came home, I thought, okay, this was 15 years ago, I'm gonna start decluttering. And it was kind of fun, because once I could throw one thing away or donate something, I could get more, get rid of more and more and more. And finally, there was a little bit of light and space, and I could feel the energy moving around a little bit. And now I need to start all over. It's accumulated again. The books are piled high, and I don't know. And a friend of mine says, "Well, I can't find my will. I misplaced my advance directive. My personal assistant did something with it. So I guess I can't die tonight." Like, that's right. You better postpone that until you have your ducks lined up. And there's I've been doing workshops with a group of friends, because we have all this information hither and yon. Maybe we've prepared for our burial or our cremation, or we know where we want to have our funeral, or maybe we want a living funeral where we have a gathering while we're still able to enjoy it. That's what I want to do. My friend Renee knew that she was dying of cancer, and she was from Dublin, and she threw herself what she called a hoolie. And it was a room probably about this size. And she sat there like a queen right in the middle of it. And it was just filled with music and poetry and food and well wishes. And she sat and soaked it up. And it was so beautiful and moving. And we all knew why we were there. And after she died, we had another gathering. I thought, well, that's what I want to do. I want to hear all the snarky remarks, and I want to sip with champagne. I don't want to be left out after I'm not here. Let's see. What? I mean, I could go on and on, but yes, thank you.
I wanted to go back to the designated spokesperson.
Yes.
I worked in healthcare oncology for a long time, and we never had problems with the physicians wanting to uphold the person's wishes. We had problems with the siblings. So mine said, "Oh, you want to kill mom? You're not going to let mom eat. I'm a dietitian." And so, it was very hard. So I suggest that when you get your designated people, make sure they can do it, that they will not go, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna kill mom." No, make sure it's somebody that I like the pit bull. But the other thing is, make sure you all talk to the rest of the family first. This is what we want. It's not gonna be a surprise, because it's a tough time. And yeah.
Did everybody hear that? Excellent, excellent advice. Thank you so much. To make sure that all the family members are on the same page, because if they're not, if somebody zooms in from another coast and says, "Oh, wait, maybe this is premature, or maybe she wouldn't have wanted this," or I don't know, once 25 years ago, she said something, and like, no, we all have to agree. Otherwise, as you're saying, the physicians are hamstrung.
Well, and they don't have to agree. The whole siblings do not have to agree. They can want other wishes, but they have to be able to respect the wishes of the designated. Yeah.
To abide by what's
You're not
in
going to get everybody.
Yeah, that's good to know. Yeah, we're never going to get everybody to agree. But yeah, that's a really important point, because we want to work with the physicians to make sure that our wishes are respected, whatever they are, in whatever direction. Other questions or comments or illustrations of that? Yes.
Law was clear in the state, according to my mother's in Ohio, and they were recently hospitalized, and we were told that consensus with the family is what they were looking for legally. So there's 3 of us, 3 siblings, 2 out of 3 make the decision. Something in place that said she wanted to be full code, so they're like, "Oh no, that's good. That's what we do here."
Yeah, I don't think it's state by state. It might be medical team by medical team,
Well,
Well-
I think if there's no designated person, maybe. If there's no person that can know their wishes and carry them out. But we've even had the family say, no, we want to do everything. And we've had ethics committee meetings and they will decide to go, and the patient saying, I want to be let go. They're aware and they want to be let go. And so we've had to advocate for the patient that way too. It's a process. It's not quick. It's not pretty, but yeah, they can do it, but maybe check state to state, but I've never heard that.
no, I haven't heard
You're
that
not
either.
gonna
Do you?
make consensus.
It is, it's state by state. So, okay, see, I told you I learned something.
Yeah. good to
Okay.
know.
Good to know. Right, and invoking the ethics committee, that's sort of what we don't want to have happen. This may be an emergency situation, and we need to be really clear about what we do or don't want to have happen. If we have to assemble a team to discuss it and review it and make a decision, our window of opportunity for whatever it is may have passed. So, and I think the default is that the medical team, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, will do everything and anything, extreme measures to keep us going. And that might be what we want, but under certain circumstances, it might not.
Wants to prolong life, even though the physician has said she would die today, a couple of weeks. There is a paperwork. What do you suggest for those three siblings? I mean, other than a lawyer.
Oh, yeah, that's not conducive to family dynamics or the grieving process or anything. Maybe some kind of counselor or mediator, to work together to say, okay, well, what do we agree on and where are we stuck and what would mom want? And yeah, and people, these are deeply held beliefs in one direction or another. And we often hear, oh, you know, if this happens or this doesn't happen, just unplug me. Well, it's not that straightforward. There's kind of no unplug me. I guess under certain circumstances there are, but it's much more nuanced. The gray area requires discussion, documentation, as we're saying. So, yeah, and
He just wants her to continue.
right. And I've talked to people in my end of life counseling, who say, oh, my spouse, my sister, whoever it is, loves me so much, she just can't bear to let me even consider hastening my death. And I sometimes say out loud, that's not love. That's selfish. If you're in agony, you're ready to move on, and somebody is preventing that from happening, that is not love. So, and it's really complicated, yeah.
I know if you're connected to hospice at all, with social worker can be helpful, but also an end of life doula.
Excellent, yes, thank you. So, end of life doula, are you familiar with this? It's a relatively recent, like in the last 20 years, let's say, and we're probably more familiar with birth doulas, people who help usher in life, and these are specially trained people who can facilitate the end of life. So helping us even with our clutter or our paperwork or conversations with family members or whatever needs to happen to make the person more prepared, more comfortable as they look at their end of day. Oh, good. You want to tell us a little bit about what you do and how it works?
But it's also a president.
Right, and I imagine that every every client is different. They have different needs, different length of time. That, this is going to happen in 2 days. I'm planning 2 months ahead. So it's very dynamic, and I have great respect for end-of-life doulas. In my end-of-life counseling, I have worked with some on behalf of their clients, and they've just been a joy to work with. Yeah.
If there's an if you just Google end of life doula, you'll get directed to certain, local and regional ones. And I can leave some of my cards with Pastor Todd as well. And if it's not me, I can help you find other local ones.
Yeah, and there's two certifying organizations, it's Melda and,
I'm in
right, there's, I think it's important to have, as we're saying, every situation is different, but the basics are important. And there's something about them that like the world, but they are terrific. And yes.
You're talking about end-of-life doulas. Doulas. But
That's a really good question. Do you know what it is?
Obviously, beginning like the word doula, I don't even know what the language derivative of, but it means an accompanier, a facilitator who accompanies you.
Is it an English word?
I think it might be from another language. And it's, as or when we're shopping for a doula, to my mind, and you'll correct me, it's kind of like looking for a therapist. It has to be a good fit. We have to be kind of clear on what we need, and the doula can say, oh, I can help you with that, or no, that's not what I do. Oh, great, thank you. The definition of a doula is a person trained to advise, inform, and offer emotional and physical comfort to a pregnant person before, during, and after the birth of their child. So we're talking about the other end of the life cycle. The word doula comes from the Greek doule, the meaning of which translates to female helper or maid servant.
And we've expanded that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yes, and I've met so many, maybe most doulas are female, but there are many males who are coming up through the ranks, and that, depending on who the client is and what they want, that might be a better fit. Yes.
What does NELDA stand for?
An International End of Life Doula Association, INELDA. And the other one is similar, and it's just not in my active file.
Yes, I have it in another document that I meant to send. Let me see, before that, this is now,
Sometimes,
yes,
but most of the time, yes. But there are people like the medically assisted ones, sometimes hospice is involved. Voluntary cessation of eating and drinking, sometimes it varies, and it's not just deathbed moment, it's the whole education.
right. Yes, thank you so much for raising that. So the other organization, NELDA, which is the International End of Association, there is the National End of Life Doula Alliance. Also great. And probably similar in terms of the certification.
whoops. Sound went off.
Right, because not, some cultures deal with things differently than we do. Turn it on. Yeah.
That is an option, but a lot of times I'm with someone 3 months, 6 months, or I'm just a death cafe person. That it's not as well. So there's no right or wrong. If you're wondering about it, look online and see what the options are. Okay, so before or after. Well, after that, we're not as helpful. I mean, it's not like, wow. Together with the family and the caregivers, and the doctors, we can do our best work when there are conversations before. And really, the primary role is what are the dying persons' wishes, and how will we honor those? And how do we gently have those conversations? One of the questions I ask again and again is, what's important today? And that is an opener to all the important stuff that you're bringing.
Mhm. And I think that if you're even considering it remotely, is to make a phone call, say, okay, this is the situation. What might I need when? And they can say, okay, well, is this in place? Is this in place? I think you're good for a while. Call me back in a few months, or oh, let's work on this. And so I think it's an organic, fluid relationship. But it's really, really valuable. So thank you for the work you do. Yes.
How are doulas compensated for their services?
Everyone has a different method of doing it. I'm in a situation where I do it as a ministry, so everyone does it differently. I'm particularly, one of the areas I focus on is groups like Hope Solution and folks that might not, that have housing insecurity. And so I started off because I want that available for people who might not have that community around them.
Thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you. It's so important. And somebody mentioned hospice, and I think there's a lot of confusion about hospice. So the requirement in California, as I understand it, and some of you will correct me if I'm wrong, is that it requires a 6-month prognosis. But that can be renewed. And many people think that hospice is, oh, well, they're giving up on me, I'm about to die, I don't want to go into hospice. And so they wait until the very end, like 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 weeks. And they could be taking advantage of all the benefits that hospice can offer. And my friend Renee, who I invoked earlier, she knew she was dying, but she went into hospice. She had to renew. They took such good care of her that she lasted longer than the 6 months, and she had to reapply. So that doesn't sound like the most horrible thing in the world. So I think if one finds oneself or a loved one in a similar situation, investigate the options of hospice. There's also palliative care, and you can probably speak to this more directly than I can, but my brother, as I said, is a palliative care physician. And my understanding is that the medical team working with us are the ones who have to make the decision to bring in palliative care or make a recommendation for hospice. And so, and they are sometimes, not always, but they are sometimes reticent to do that. They want to keep trying another procedure or another protocol, which may be great and that may be what we want. Or we might be saying, I'm exhausted, I'm in pain, I'm ready for hospice. I'm ready for somebody to help me ease this transition. So the medical proxy might be a person to say, you know, I know that when she got to this point, she didn't want those interventions. At what point can we bring in palliative care and or hospice? So these are all things to think about, to be aware of as our end of life options and situation unfolds. And what might look like a viable option at one point could look completely different 6 months down the line or 6 years later. So we have to, and there are all kinds of developments happening, both medically and socially and in every way, shape, and form. So we kind of have to think about it, talk about it, read about it, keep ourselves informed so that when we get to that bought, that fork in the road, we know what to do. I remember one of the death cafes years ago, there was an estate planner, and she had us in hysterics because she said, well, I work with people, and we run over the paperwork, and they say, well, if I die, well, wait a second, let's back up a second. If you die, how about when you die? So we all have a buffer, linguistically or otherwise. We don't want to talk about it. Oh, maybe if I don't talk about it, it won't happen. But it behooves us to really talk about it, think about it, have these conversations with our family members, as challenging as they might be, maybe with the support of a doula, counselor, maybe with the physician, and maybe not. I remember I got a new physician some years ago when I was first volunteering in the Right to Die movement. And so I went all eager beaver and well, what do you think about this? And what about, oh my God, my poor young physician was so uncomfortable. We'd have to have a conversation. I said, yes, we will of course have to have a conversation, and it's way premature, but I just want to start finding out who you are and what your position is on that. Yes.
The other thing I want to say about palliative care is I believe you're not going for a cure, you're going to promote comfort. And even amongst a lot of the nurses I worked with, they would think, oh, well, they're not ready for hospice. Hospice is under the umbrella of palliative care. And so sometimes somebody, especially people of color who didn't always get a lot of treatment, they just want to get a chance. So they'll go under the palliative care thing, but they're going to try this. They'll try this, maybe this chemo. And if it doesn't work or they can't tolerate it, then they're willing to go. But so it's not the same thing as giving up. It's about promoting comfort and taking away pain.
Absolutely. Thank you because it's very nuanced. And as we said earlier, different religious groups, different cultural groups might have a different perspective on what they want when or what this means. So there's a lot of misinformation floating around, a lot of lack of information. And so as a former librarian, I'm all about information is power. And maybe we won't need to exercise any of these things. Maybe we'll just, wake up dead one morning. But at least we have it in place so that if something goes wrong, we have some control over this uncontrollable situation. More questions, comments, stories? Yes.
A family member or a friend or an acquaintance, if none of those folks are good for that role, can you speak to other options, like maybe people you hire, maybe attorneys, fiduciaries? I don't know.
Yeah, good point. And I meant to mention that. Do I have it? Which let's see. Maybe I'm juggling between two documents. But yeah, and I remember one woman at Death Cafe telling us, oh, no, I'm not talking to any of my family members. I don't trust them to do right by me. And my next door neighbor, she gets me. She knows who I am and what I want. I'm naming her as my medical proxy. So as I say, it's not a popularity contest. It's not your nearest and dearest. But there's an alliance of professional health advocates. Alliance of professional health advocates. And these are people that you can put in place. And I think it's a relatively nominal fee. And so you get the paperwork in place. And then if they're called on to advocate for you, then there's a fee structure, but not until then. So it's not like they're on a retainer. So that might be, if you can think of the right person in your circle, that might be something to investigate. I don't know anybody who's used them. Maybe it could be our guinea pig. Is there another question over here? No. You're asking all the right questions. This is great. Bring them on. And obviously I don't have all the answers, but amongst us all, we're sharing the information that we have. I guess one of the things that I like to stress, if it hasn't already been stressed, is just how complicated this is. It's not straightforward. And just when we think we have all the ducks lined up, it could all fall apart. So the more documentation we have in place, the more conversations we've had, the more we've thought it through, and maybe the more experiences like, oh, I definitely don't want to have happened to me what happened to him. Oh, she went the way I want to go. What do I have to do? And one of the things I do is look at films, documentaries or feature films. And I don't know if any of you have seen the brand new Pedro Almodovar film called The Room Next Door with Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton. And I don't want to say too much about it, but let's just say that it involves Tilda Swinton seeking to choose the time of her death and enlisting Julianne Moore to support her. And so I don't think it's Pedro Almodovar's best film, but it's an interesting way into this topic. So one of the things that the organization I volunteer with, Final Exit Network, has done is we have a tab on our website called 15 Favorite Conversation Starters. So it's articles, it's books, it's films that one can watch, think about, and talk about, because sometimes we find it's easier if it's a little bit abstract and it's not like, I want this or I want you to do that. It's more like, well, Susan Sarandon in Blackbird and her wildly dysfunctional family. I identify with that daughter. Oh, I identify with the husband. And it's a bit of a remove so that it might be safer or more straightforward to have some of those conversations. Yeah. Well, that would be part of the will part of it. Yeah. So depending on what kind of estate, what kind of assets there are, but the more one can plan in advance, the better, because some people have no support system, no family, no social, they're really isolated. Other people have a huge swarm, but people are going to be grief stricken. And the more we can do in advance to help them sort through that, the better. It's really a gift we can leave them. And there are workbooks, many workbooks to set down some of what we want. So the one I'm working on is called I'm Dead, Now What? And it lists, okay, what medications are you on? What are you allergic to? What are your passwords for this? Where's your banking done? Who's your primary care physician? What are the relatives that you want notified? It goes into minute detail. And I realized all of it was in my head or in my file here or here, but pulling it together took a long time. So to have a guide to say, oh yeah, what about that? You did pay for that cremation. Who should they call? And so the more that kind of stuff can be pulled together and put in one place and that people can have access to, know where it is, the better. They will really, it will make the grieving process that much clearer and cleaner. Yes.
But if you're dead, why do they need to know your medications?
Well, this is, that's a really good point. Why do they need to know your medications? I think the book I'm talking about is a little bit broader than just I'm dead. It's like, if we're not able to communicate, and somebody says, well, I think she's allergic to aspirin, but I can't really remember. And one of the people I'm working on this project with is a death doula, and so she knows. She says, okay, I want I want warm socks because my feet get cold. Or I really like lotion, but I don't want it to be peppermint or, whatever flavor. So she knows how specific to be, because otherwise the caregivers may be really well-meaning and, oh, it turns out I'm allergic to citrus, or whatever the case might be. So, yeah, it's a little, yeah, I understand, yeah. And I picked that one because the title is so irreverent, but there are many, many of these. And my friend who I mentioned earlier, who said, oh, I need to order that. What was the name of that again? I need a few more days before I can die because I don't have my things in place. Yes.
So, I'm hearing a lot, and I didn't bring my notepad with me. And I'm wondering if, someone who's better at notes could jot down the organization that you work with, so, do some bullets about what are you talking about?
Yes, what the heck am I talking about? Well, and I beg your pardon because I do have a sheet that I meant to send to Todd to print out to give you, and I apologize, I did not do that. But you'll get it. I'll send it to him and he can make copies, or I can email it to you. But it has all of these things, the advanced care directive, it has
I was gonna say, why don't I pass around a piece of paper for people's emails? And then
that'd be great. Thank you very much. Thank you. So there's a link to the California Advanced Care Directive. There's some of the organizations like Compassionate Choices, the organization I volunteer with, Final Exit Network. So it's exactly as you described, a list. Some of them may be relevant now, some of them may become relevant. You may be familiar with 5 Wishes, which is describes itself as easy to use legal advanced directive document written in everyday language. So some of these advanced care documents are 30 pages, gobbledygook, and some are very short, 3 to 5 pages. I picked the one that Kaiser uses because I thought my physicians would be most familiar with that form and formatting. And then my ace in the hole, as I said, is my brother and my nephew. So I sent my draft to them and they said, oh, no, take that out. No, we'll make sure you have that. So, and certainly go over it with one's medical proxy. Wait, I'm confused about this. Well, wait, do you really want to do this? So, yes.
At some point, can you give us a 30-second sales pitch for Final Exit
Yes,
membership?
I certainly can. And it's sort of the previews of coming attractions for what I'm really going to talk about in depth. So Final Exit Network is an organization that is celebrating its 20th anniversary, and it's an outgrowth of the old Hemlock Society. How many of you remember the Hemlock Society founded by Derek Humphry in whatever that was, I think the early 90s. And so if one goes to finalexitnetwork.org, there's all kinds of resources in terms of, we have a supplemental advanced directive for dementia, for example. I know that's one concern that many of us have. The physical body is one thing, but our cognition is something else. And what if it starts to go south? What are our options? And I have a friend whose mother she's approaching 100, and she is deep into Alzheimer'sville. No provisions made, no paperwork. So she's being kept comfortable, but would she want to be kept in this condition? So Final Exit Network has a lot of resources. What we're primarily known for is providing information on hastening one's death. And the modality that we use is inert gas. So it used to be helium. Now the recommendation is nitrogen. If and when the time comes, the person pulls the hood over their head, they breathe normally and naturally for about 45 seconds, lose consciousness, and the heart stops after about 15 minutes. And this modality is totally doable on one's own. What Planet Exit Network offers is the expertise and experience of our exit guides. So these are guides who have been trained, who can work with the person, show them how to assemble the equipment, and be with them at the time of the exit, if that's what's desired. So I could go on and on. Oh, and also one-on-one counseling. So I said I'm a regional coordinator, so my territory does not include California, it's more the Pacific Northwest and across the top of the country. But I get calls and people say, okay, this is my situation, or this is my loved one's situation. What are my options? And so we can go through voluntarily stopping eating and drinking. What are the pros and cons of that? What about a clinic in Switzerland? Well, is that really viable given the extreme expense and getting oneself halfway around the world? So there's a variety of options, and some people, none of them are really particularly viable, and make one decision and then realize a little bit later down the line, oh, I think I'm going to switch gears. I had a client who applied and was accepted to Final Exit Network, and then he said, you know what, I changed my mind, I'm going to Switzerland. And then he called me and said, there's no way I'm going to be able to get myself to Switzerland. Who am I kidding? And I reapply. So yeah, he could reapply. He was accepted, and I just learned a few weeks ago that he exited. So what might look like a viable option at one point can shift over time. Does that give you a bit of a?
Does becoming a member of Final Exit mean you're applying for service?
No, thank you for clarifying that. So we used to, when I first started, close to 10 years ago, we used to require that people applying had to be members, and we have gotten rid of that. So we're an entirely membership organization. We rely on bequests and donations, but to apply for services does not require membership. The membership perks are the newsletter, which I often have an essay in, and then we have a monthly Chosen Deaf Forum, which is sort of like a deaf cafe, but it's specifically for people who are even contemplating their end-of-life option. Well, what would it mean? And has anybody, how long does it take to voluntarily stop eating, drinking? And how should I prepare and plan? And where do I get the nitrogen? And what? So it's a little more focused. So there's a few benefits to joining, not the least of which is supporting this grassroots groups who, and I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to people and they are so grateful to know that one, have somebody listen to them, take them seriously, and tell them what their options might be. And I end every conversation with, if I can be of additional support, please don't hesitate to call me. Many times I never speak to them again, but often 3 weeks later, 3 months later, 3 years later, they will call and say, okay, things are really serious now. I think I might want to apply, or remind me what my options are, or I've forgotten. I don't know what I did with the paperwork you sent me. So when one has a specific situation or can anticipate one, and we recommend initiating an application when the person thinks they're within 6 months to a year of wanting to exit. And if the application is approved and they haven't exited at the end of 3 years, we ask them to reapply just to make sure that we have updated information. So, yes.
What does it take to qualify?
Well, that's a good question. So our criteria is much broader than California's medical aid in dying, which requires that you might have a terminal diagnosis and a 6-month prognosis. So we do not require that, which means that we are able to support neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and ALS. We're able to support cognitive decline. And we have a category that we call constellation of conditions. So it's any one of which might not qualify one. Well, I'm no longer driving. Well, I can't see very well. My hearing is going. I'm not able to do this. So one's quality of life is shrinking, and it's going to continue to shrink. And although chronological age is a factor, it's not the factor. And so we're able to support people in that category as well. So, and some people have trouble getting two physicians to sign off on the California medical aid in dying. So and I've had clients who didn't realize that they might qualify for medical aid in dying, or they did and they prefer to do this modality. So they say our needs and our values and our options can shift over time. But thank you for pinning me down, man. That's great. Yes. Oh, Final Exit Network. You guys are asking all the right questions. This is terrific. So our legal counsel advises us that everyone has the right to hasten their death. What Final Exit Network offers is information and support. So we don't provide equipment, we don't touch the equipment, we don't remove the equipment, which we could get accused of tampering with the death theme. So we are just providing information and support. Now, as you might well imagine, we have been sued more than once. People, and so we have a very strict protocol. And I'll just go into it briefly, even though that's what I'm going to talk about more next time. So it's a letter saying, this is my situation, this is my quality of life, these are my diagnoses, these are the treatments I've either tried or rejected. And that is augmented with medical records that substantiate what's in the letter. Then there's a very in-depth phone interview that dives deep. Do you have the physical capability to make this happen? Are there pets involved? Where will this take place? Do you have a date in mind? Who among your circle of family, friends, and physicians is aware of the plan? Who's supportive? So they drill pretty deep, and then all that paperwork gets sent by me, the regional coordinator, to our medical review committee, and they make the determination. Usually by the time it gets that far in the process, they say, yes, this application is for exit guide assignment. Sometimes they say we really want to be completely sure we get one more test or one more letter from the specialist. And sometimes they say it's too soon. We can't, there's something, a red flag that might put the volunteers or the organization at risk, so we can't approve this application. If the application is approved, then the regional coordinator finds exit guides available to work with the person. They do more, go over more details, answer more questions, send them the list of equipment, buys it, has it on site, then the exit guides, and they travel in pairs, make a home visit. As I said, they don't touch anything, but they will be very patient and show the person how to assemble it, do a little dress rehearsal, then the person has everything they need to move forward. And my friend Margaret that I told you about earlier, she was really impatient, she was frustrated, she was losing her eyesight. Can't you just do this for me? I can't do it, I can't do it. She was really coming unglued. And I was so impressed, the guys were so professional and patient. No, you can't touch anything, but let's start over. You're gonna get it. We'll just, take a deep breath. And sure enough, she was able to do it. So that is what we call the education visit. Then the person has everything they need to move forward, either on their own, but what usually happens is that they call the exit guides back at a later date to say, okay, now I'm really ready to roll. And the exit guides will come back and be with the person at the time of the exit to make sure that there are no mishaps, because that's the other thing I tell everyone I talk to. Be 100% certain you're going to be 100% successful. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten calls from people saying, well, I got impatient, and I got frustrated, and I took all the pills in my medicine cabinet, or did this, or I did that. And they ended up on suicide watch, they risked being incapacitated or incarcerated, or institutionalized. So all the things they were trying to avoid, so no mishaps. No, it's national. So it's Final Exit Network, and it's confusing because Final Exit is the name of Derek Humphry's book. And in fact, it's available as an ebook update, Final Exit 2020. And there's another international organization called Exit International. And so it's as if we tried to make it as confusing as humanly possible. And I think we're succeeding. So, yeah, it's challenging. Yeah. Okay, good question. And then did you have a question that no, okay. So, I'll tell a story about cognitive decline that my friend and former colleague would share. So she was working with a fellow who knew that his cognition was declining. And she made the education visit and scheduled the second visit. But his family said, oh, there's a big family event, there's a wedding, child or something. So let's push it back a few months. And my colleague said, no, I think his window is closing. Well, sure enough, she comes back on that date. He doesn't know who she is, what's going to happen, why is she there? But in this particular case, a week or two later, he's completely lucid. Where is she? Why didn't she come? Get her over here now. Fortunately, she lived close by. She could drop everything, get in the car, drive to him. Yes, I understand what's happening. Yes, I want this to happen. Yes, let's move forward. And she was able to support the exit. But as you might imagine, that's a very rare situation. So we have what we call the window of opportunity. Nobody wants to leave earlier than necessary, but they need to exit while they're physically and or not mentally able to make it happen. Because if he had really not, if he'd missed his window, then there's the whole trajectory of cognitive decline. And sometimes, as I said, we have an supplemental advanced directive for dementia, but that's at the very end where you can say, I don't want to be force fed, but you've already endured for however many months or years in a state that you may or may not want to have been in. So as a physical aspect, well, I'll go over that next time. You get the gist of it. Yeah, did you have a question?
Is it pills? Is it shots?
No, it's inert gas. Honestly. Yeah. Yeah. No, in Canada, it's I don't even know what it is, but it's an administered shot. And I think similarly in Switzerland, although it has to be self-administered, with the medical aid in dying, it's 5 different compounds taken in a certain sequence over a certain amount of time. So none of this is as simple. The book that I recommend that's put out by Exit International is called The Peaceful Pill Handbook. Oh, great, I want that. Where do I get the peaceful pill? It doesn't exist. So it's a misnomer and it's frustrating. We wish we could just take a pill and be on our way. Yes.
Why wouldn't they also do that?
Good question. Any thoughts about that? I mean, every conversation I have with my client, well, wait, why are we more merciful to our pets than to our loved ones?
you give them like an anti-anxiety
Right.
calming. Then when the person's.
Right. Yeah, it makes perfect sense, but given the situation, and there's only 11 jurisdictions in the United States that have medical aid in dying. And there are states, Michigan, Massachusetts, New York, that have been trying for years to get it on the books. And the opposition is so strong. So, I mean, I wish that was a possibility, but I don't see it happening anytime soon.
I mean, it can be hard for you, right? I think obviously you want.
Right, yeah. So, and one of the compounds in that 5 sequence is an epidemic, because one risks bubbling up everything. So that's why we really need, and someone say, well, I'm gonna take a shot of whiskey to make sure it all, well, that might be the perfect thing or the perfectly wrong thing. So I want to be mindful of time, so let me let you go unless there are last burning questions. Yes. Well, it's either gonna be me or Tom. It's gonna be Tom.
Okay,
So, yes, thank you for,
just wanted to clarify.
yeah, thank you for, and thanks for keeping me on track. As you can see, I'm full of hot air, and I'll just talk about whatever is in front of my face. So let me end with a little quote by the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, and then I'll let you get on with your afternoon. Let's see, where? Okay, he says, if I take death into my life, acknowledge it, and face it squarely, I will free myself from the anxiety of death and the pettiness of life. And only then will I be free to become myself. Thank you very much for being here.
We appreciate you being here today. The next session will be February 9th. That's the second Sunday of February. We do plan to start at 11 a.m. That Sunday doesn't look as full as this Sunday was for us. We hope that you have been blessed by being here, that you've been enjoyed the engagement, the presentation. From Jim, one note about the email addresses. If you're not already on our email list that you supplied, your email list, I promise you, we're not going to start emailing you about other stuff. I will send you this one email with this information from Jim, and we'll include his contact information so you can reach out to him. Thank you for being here. Have a blessed rest of the day.